What happened to every protagonist in Fallout? Every Fallout protagonist saved the wasteland from complete destruction. From stopping the Master's army to destroying the Institute, they were all legends. But after each game, most of them just vanished. So what actually happened to every Fallout protagonist? 1. The Vault Dweller. In the years before the bombs, America built vaults that promised safety to those selected or wealthy enough to buy entry. Though many of these vaults would go on to commit cruel experiments designed by the cold geniuses at Vault-Tec, the original Fallout protagonist's Vault 13, however, was one of the few designed for survival through isolation. In 2161, 84 years after the war, they would face uncertainty when their water purification system began to fail. Without a replacement, the Overseer would have no other solution to this problem but to select a group of healthy adults to search for it. The Vault Dweller would draw the short one, and thus began his journey into the wasteland. Our protagonist was indoctrinated from birth to never question their Overseer, would journey into the wasteland trusting every word that the Overseer had spoken to him. The first few days were to be amongst the worst, with the skeletal remains of vault dwellers that had previously been sent out dotting the landscape directly outside the vault entrance. Surviving those harrowing first few days outside would lead him to fighting off mutants of all kinds, growing more acclimated to the outside world with each encounter. The Overseer could only provide him with the location of Vault 15, which might have the water chip that they needed to restore the purification system. The first place of civilization that he encountered would be Sandy Sands, a struggling desert community that would later go on to become the capital of the new California Republic and bring about a period of relative peace to the California wasteland. But none of that would have been possible had the Vault Dweller had not cleared the Rad Scorpion caves nearby and rescued one of the future founders and the second president of the NCR, Tandy, from a raider gang known as the Great Khans. Already, would the Vault Dweller make his mark on history, with the legend of him rescuing Tandy celebrated all over the NCR. The Vault Dweller could not stay at Sandy Sands for long, as he would need to make his way to Vault 15 to retrieve the water chip. He would befriend a local named Ian, a retired guard for a caravan company, who joined him on his quest to find the water chip. He would arrive at Vault 15 and discover that a social experiment had been conducted on the vault. The dwellers had been intentionally selected in order to create an ideological conflict. Factions within the vault would fight amongst one another, becoming residents of Sandy Sand and raider groups like the Great Khans, Jackals, and Vipers. The Vault Dweller's search of Vault 15 would yield nothing, as he discovered that the only access route to the water purification system had collapsed and couldn't be accessed. To search for further leads, the Vault Dweller would arrive in Junktown, where he found himself in the middle of a brewing conflict between the mayor of Junktown, Killian Darkwater, and a criminal casino owner named Gizmo. He would side with Junktown's mayor and uncover the full extent of Gizmo's criminal operations, putting an end to Gizmo's plot to take over the town, setting Junktown on a more honest path. It was there that he would don a leather jacket, which resembled a jacket worn by a stray dog's former owner, Dogmeat, who would bond with the Vault Dweller and become his faithful companion. From Junktown, he would be directed to the largest center of trade in California, which was founded by water merchants who traded clean water to the other communities of the wasteland. There, he would hire water caravans to supply Vault 13, being forced to make the decision to give the location of the vault so the delivery could be made to buy a little more time until a replacement water chip could be found as a more long-term solution to the vault's water problems. His next lead would take him to Necropolis, formerly known as Bakersfield, which was populated entirely by heavily mutated humans referred by wastelanders as ghouls, that were created when Vault 12's door failed to seal properly during the final hours of the Great War. The Vault Dweller's encounter with super mutants there would mark the first between him and the Master's army, known as Unity. He would battle with the super mutants, with his companion, Ian, losing his life at the hands of a flamethrower wielded by one of the mutants. Ian's death would haunt the Vault Dweller for the rest of his life, but it was not in vain. The Vault Dweller would find the water chip in the ruins of Vault 12, and return to Vault 13 shortly after, though the super mutants of Unity would return to Necropolis and massacre everyone. Upon returning to Vault 13, he would inform the Overseer of the existential threat posed by the super mutant army. Seeing the urgency, the Overseer would give the Vault Dweller one last mission to stop the mutant army and secure the long-term safety of the vault. The Vault Dweller would travel back to the hub, where he would rescue a Brotherhood of Steel initiate named Jonathan, who directed him back to the Lost Hills bunker. The Brotherhood began as survivors of the U.S. military personnel stationed at Mariposa Military Base after they mutinied upon discovery of the unethical FEV experiments conducted on Chinese prisoners of war. Like the Vault 13 dwellers, they were firm isolationists and agreed to recruit the Vault Dweller only if he could travel to the Glow and retrieve an ancient Brotherhood disk from the time of the Brotherhood's founding. This task would not be easy, as a nuclear barrage had showered the area and the site was still hot with radiation around 100 100 years after the war, which left it lifeless. He would successfully retrieve the ancient Brotherhood disc from the glow and return to the Brotherhood, who welcomed him into their ranks. They would arm the Vault Dweller from their vast hoard of pre-war weapons and army, and guide him towards the Boneyard, where he might find the source of the super mutants. Continuing his quest, the Vault Dweller would encounter a group of doctors who provided honest health care to anyone in need, known as the Followers of the Apocalypse, in the Boneyard, which were the post-war ruins of the largest city before the war, Los Angeles. There, the Vault Dweller would find many enemies, and few friends, as he learned more about the nature of Master. He would learn of a vault, hidden in the Boneyard, that the Master called his cathedral and made his home. Dogmeat would perish to its defenses as they approached it. Deep underground, he would find the very evil he had been seeking. What he found was a dim and horrifying vault originally constructed to act as a demonstration for what the vaults would look like upon completion. The very foundations had been transformed into that of nightmares. The walls dripped with human flesh, and the screams of the dying echoed through the halls. The Vault Dweller would face many threats within. The Vault Dweller would have to kill one of their servants and take there his clothing as a disguise to remain hidden. Traveling ever deeper, he would find that the halls became more and more organic, with the most gruesome being the sections that were more alive than others. The Vault Dweller would go on to record his adventures, describing the moment he came face to face with the Master. "I found myself in the presence of the most hideous sight yet. I still cannot bring myself to write of this discovery, but let it be known that when I left, the beast was dead, and the Master of the mutant army was no more." He would learn of the Master's origins. He was once a human by the name of Richard Gray, who sought to find the origins of mutants that had begun to appear shortly after the end of the war. He and a group of survivors would travel down into the Mariposa military base, the same base where the Brotherhood found their origins, with many falling to the dangers found there. Richard would be knocked unconscious and abandoned by the rest of his group, being exposed to the overwhelming presence of FEV found there. The FEV would give him psychic power that he could use to control other mutants, while also reducing his body into an octopus-like mass of flesh, capable of telepathic communication and connecting into the hardware of the vault. The Master planned to unify the wasteland by mutating everyone into perfect bodies, strong enough to survive the worst that the post-war world had to offer. But there was one flaw in his plan, as the FEV rendered super mutants sterile. Using this knowledge, the Vault Dweller could convince him to kill himself or destroy a nuclear device found there. The result is the same. The Vault Dweller escaped after having destroyed the Master and the FEV vats, bringing an end to this period of turmoil that threatened all life in the wasteland. The mutant army would fracture and turn on itself. The Vault Dweller would return to Vault 13, where the Overseer would tell him that he no longer had a place there, due to the fear that the Vault Dweller's experiences had changed him, and his example could lead others to break their isolation. He left peacefully, though he would never forgive the Overseer for exiling him. He would stay around the outskirts of the vault until others learned of his fate and left Vault 13 to join him. They would go on to form the community of Arroyo, north of Vault 13, and became a tribe of their own. Though the tribe's early years would be marked by hardship, the Vault Dweller would teach them agriculture, engineering, and the survival skills he learned during his adventure. He would fall in love and settle down with his partner, Pat, who became co-leader of the tribe. The Vault Dweller's story, and his anguished departure from Vault 13, is documented in both his memoir and the oral traditions of the tribe, after having been asked to leave a record of his knowledge for future generations. The NCR would celebrate the Vault Dweller well a century later. The Vault Dweller left his mark on the world, leaving it better off than he had found it. His jumpsuit would go on to be revered as a holy object by the tribe and enshrined. 2. The Chosen One. In the year 2221, on 20th March, the tribal elder who was the daughter of the Vault Dweller would give birth to a boy who would later go on to be known as the Chosen One. This child would be born of the third generation after the Vault Dweller had founded the village of Arroyo. He would be trained from birth to be the tribe's champion and eventual elder. He would train with the tribe's shaman, Hakunin, to fortify his mind and think beyond what they could see. To achieve this, the two would engage in hallucinogens. Upon completion of his training at the age of 20, the child would be summoned by his mother, who would inform him that there are things you must know, continuing on to tell of the decay of the village, that the Brahmin are dying, the children are sick, and the crops are withering, but there is hope still, informing the Chosen that the old discs speak of an item called the Garden of Eden Creation Kit. It is said that it can bring life to the wasteland. She told the Chosen One that they must go on a quest to retrieve a Gek that would save their village. The Chosen Chosen One would be sent to complete the Temple of Trials, which would test his skills in order to see if he was ready to become the tribe's champion. The Temple of Trials would prove to be a test for the Chosen One, as they would have to fight through many rat ants, giant scorpions, and traverse many obstacles to get to the end. At the end, he would face one file test, requiring the Chosen One to engage in hand-to-hand combat with Cameron, the guardian of the Holy Jumpsuit. Upon defeating Cameron, the child will claim the Holy Jumpsuit and become the tribe's champion. Arroyo was not a wealthy village. His mother could only provide the Chosen One with a Vault 13 water flask and $152 to aid them on their journey. She directed the Chosen One to track down Vic, a trader from Klamath, who the tribe purchased the Vault 13 water flask from, as Vault 13 might have a geck. Arriving at Klamath, they find Vic's house unlocked and he was nowhere to be seen. The Chosen One would have to ask around the community to discover where Vic might have gone, which he would discover from the locals that Vic was last seen at the Den, a safe haven for scum and slavers. The Chosen One would discover that Vic had been enslaved because he had not delivered a radio that he had already been paid for. To free Vic, the Chosen One had to acquire 1,000 caps and an old radio that Vic had back at his house. Upon release from captivity, Vic would inform the Chosen One that he had purchased it from a Brahmin dealer named Ed in Vault City. Ed in Vault City would only recall that he had found it somewhere around the main NCR territories. During a check for a Vault City Day pass, a guard would recognize the Vault 13 jumpsuit on the Chosen One, where he would direct the Vault Dweller to Joanne Lynette, the first citizen. Joanne would reveal to the Chosen One that Vault City was created by the former dwellers of Vault 8, who used their GX to make it an oasis. But the Vault systems might have information on other vaults, which they could only share if the Chosen One becomes a citizen of Vault City. To earn citizenship, the Chosen One was tasked with resolving an issue at a nuclear reactor in the nearby ghoul community of Gecko. It had caused their groundwater to become radioactive. The leader of Gecko, a ghoul by the name of Lenny, would welcome the Chosen One and guide him to talk to another ghoul named Harold, who should be able to solve the radiation leak. With the Chosen One's help, Harold would correct the leak by acquiring parts from Vault City. The Chosen One would also help provide protections from Vault City in the form of a pact between the two. Gecko will provide Vault City with electricity, if Vault City would provide Gecko with medical supplies. Outside Vault City, at a bar named the Spittoon, the Chosen One will befriend the owner and bartender John Cassidy. John will accompany the Chosen One quest for some time until returning home to his family. His daughter, Rose of Sharon Cassidy, is none other than the companion Cass from Fallout New Vegas, who found herself in New Vegas on caravan work. Granted citizenship for his service, the Chosen One would search the records of Vault City for the location of Vault 13, finding only a lead to Vault 15, which was also given a geck. They would later learn that the Enclave was the remnants of a pre-war United States shadow governmental organization. At some point, the Chosen One will pass through the town of Modoc, where the Chosen would discover that Rose at Rose's bed and breakfast had managed to capture a Deathclaw and farm her for eggs, which Rose used to make wasteland omelets, a very lucrative resource for her. The Chosen One, for one reason or another, would take it upon himself to walk around back and put the Deathclaw out of its misery. This tale would still be told by Rose's relatives in 2281, with the courier of Fallout New Vegas learning about it from Rose's niece, Jazz Wilkins, who runs the mess hall in Sloan. The Chosen One would come across the community of Broken Hills, a safe haven for super mutants, humans, and ghouls. Their sheriff was a super mutant named Marcus, who asked for the Chosen One's assistance in collecting parts to repair the old uranium mine in Broken Hills, which would provide a steady source of income for the city. To gather the parts, the Chosen One would travel to New Reno, a community that thrived off gambling and criminal activities. Marcus would accompany the Chosen One on this mission, though in his absence, a struggle would rise amongst the humans and mutants of Broken Hills. 4 crime syndicates are struggling for control over New Reno, the Salvatores, Mordinos, Bishops, and Wrights. The Chosen One would have a romantic encounter with either Leslie Ann Bishop or Angela Bishop, who are the wife and daughter of John Bishop, the leader of the feared Bishop crime family. The Chosen One with Marcus would return to Broken Hills and discover the discourse that had taken place when they were informed that multiple humans had gone missing. Upon investigation, they would discover a tunnel beneath a communal toilet littered with the remains of the missing humans. They would find a note leading them to a super mutant named Francis, who had started to target and murder humans that he had discovered were part of a conspiracy to rid the town of its super mutant population. Francis would inform the Chosen One that a human named Jacob and his wife were planning an attack on the super mutant population. Jacob would openly admit this and request the aid of the Chosen One, who declined. Marcus would exile Francis, who left willingly, and arrest Jacob and his wife. After arresting the conspirators, Marcus would join the Chosen One on his travels as thanks for his aid in solving the town's struggles. The Chosen One would arrive at the entrance to Vault 15, where they would aid a swatter named Rebecca, whose daughter, Chrissy, had disappeared. They rescued Rebecca from a member of the Great Great Khans who had captured her, with Rebecca revealing that Great Khans had taken control of the vault, together with the leader of the squatters, Zeke, who reluctantly aided the Great Khans in exchange for them restoring the vault. Zeke sent the Chosen One on a mission to contact the NCR, who would secure the safety of the squatters in exchange for access to the vault. But the Chosen One would have to deal with Darien, the leader of the Great Khans who had captured Rebecca near their secret entrance to the vault. The NCR would reveal that the community of Sandy Sands was created by Vault 15's only Gek and founded by some of the dwellers of Vault 15, who split away from the rest that later fought amongst themselves and divided into the Great Khans and Vipers. The Dweller would return to where they had found Rebecca and take a keycard to Darien's secret entrance from the corpse of a Great Khan. Once inside, the Great Khan who guarded the entrance would assume that they were fresh recruits into their ranks. They continued on to the control room, where they found Darien, who would reveal that they were the son of the raider who had captured Tandy in the first Fallout game. He blamed Tandy for his father's death and made it his life's work to put an end to the NCR and Tandy. The Chosen One would put an end to his ambitions, leading to the Great Khans fracturing and leaving Vault 15. Marcus and the Chosen One searched the control room's terminals for the location of nearby vaults, where they finally located Vault 13. When they arrived at Vault 13, they found many friendly and intelligent Deathclaws, who spoke English. The leader of the Deathclaws, Gruther, informed them that the overseer of Vault 13 had been deposed of, with the Dwellers having decided to get rid of the position entirely after his decision to exile the Vault Dweller. Gruther will tell him that Vault 13 had contacted the Brotherhood of Steel, who agreed to install an automated computer to control the vault systems, which would be sent a code by Enclave to activate the Reclamation Day protocol, which instructed the Vault Dwellers to emerge to the surface. On May 16, 2241, shortly before the start of the Chosen One's journey, the Enclave would greet the Vault 13 Dwellers with a massacre immediately after the entrance was opened. They would capture many of the survivors of this massacre and take them back to the oil rig. The Enclave would send their Deathclaws to the vault to take the fall for the massacre, so they could remain hidden and the wasteland unprepared for the threat they faced. The Deathclaws would rebel and make Vault 13 their new home, with humans joining their community as time went on. A saboteur would damage the automated computer controlling the vault's systems, which prevented the community from accessing the vault's supplies. Gruther offered to give the Chosen One the vault's Jek if he could repair the vault's computer. The Chosen One and Marcus would acquire a replacement from Vault 8 and be provided with a Gek in return. Gruther would give the Chosen One the Jek he had promised, and as they exited the vault, they would be approached by Gruther's son, Gorus, who would accompany the Chosen One back to Arroyo so that he could learn about other societies and cultures. Gorus would reveal many of the Enclave's secrets, including the information that the Enclave were conducting experiments with FEV. Before he could share more information with the Chosen One and Marcus, Gorus would be overcome by some sort of instinctive alert that his family back at Vault 13 were in some sort of trouble. They would return to find that the new residents of Vault 13 had met the same fate as the previous dwellers. The Enclave had returned and massacred them. In an assault led by Frank Harrigan, encounter the gigantic power armor-clad super mutant Frank Harrigan. Frank would murder Gruther with a single punch, before taking his body back to the Enclave's headquarters to be dissected and studied. Upon returning to Arroyo, the Chosen One discovered that their village was empty of all life. The body of the tribe's shaman was severely burnt, but his spirit would return to give the group one last message. Dark souls came, and they took everyone, and the evil ones burned our warriors with the lights of hell. All were dead or taken. Finally, revealing to the player where he could find the evil ones, at a place called Navarro, surrounded by the ocean. The Chosen One, Marcus, and Gorus would follow the trail of an aircraft spotted in the sky. Following it, they come across a wastelander named Chris, who the Chosen One convinced that they wanted to join the Enclave. Believing this, Chris directed them to a trail that led through a forest in the back of his shed. They would arrive at the Enclave fortress of Navarro, where Marcus and Gorus would have to wait outside. Upon entering, a drill instructor of the Enclave, Sergeant Arch Dornan, mistook him for a private who had lost their armor. "You are out of uniform, soldier. Where is your power armor? Don't have any? You expect me to believe that, maggot? The truth is you lost an expensive piece of army issue equipment. That suit is going to come out of your pay, and you will remain in this man's army until you are 510 years old, which is the number of years it will take for you to pay for a Mark II powered combat armor you have lost. Report to the armory and have a new suit issued to you, then report back to me. Private. Dismissed." During the events in Fallout New Vegas, Cannibal Johnson, an Enclave remnant, would go on to share the story of the time Dornan chastised a private for losing their power armor with the courier. Inside the base, the Chosen One can acquire a suit of Enclave power armor. They would then encounter an Enclave scientist who tasked them with the execution of the only intelligent Deathclaw they had managed to capture from Vault 13. The Chosen One would enter the Deathclaw's cell, where the Deathclaw would recognize recognize him and introduce himself as Zarn. He would tell Zarn of Gorys's survival and devise a plan to acquire the scientist's keycard to a backdoor exit out of Navarro. Upon his return to the scientist, they would reveal that they disabled the legs of their intelligence-enhanced cyberdog assistant for biting him, making sure to taunt the cyberdog whenever possible. Upon being repaired by the Vault Dweller, the scientist's cyberdog assistant named K9 would immediately murder the scientist, the Chosen One, Zarn, and K9 fought their way through the Enclave until they reached the commander of the base, who was swiftly executed. They searched the Enclave commander's office, only to find a memory card that the cyberdog believed might have information on it that could aid the Chosen One. The trio would make their escape through the back entrance using the scientist's keycard, with Zarn returning to Vault 13 after a brief conversation with Gorys. To save his tribe, the Chosen One travels to San Francisco after K9 revealed that the Enclave was in conflict with the survivors of San Francisco, where he is able to learn the location of the Enclave's main headquarters on the Poseidon oil rig, 175 miles off the coast, from a Chinese supercomputer found there. Aided by a deserter from Navarro, the Chosen One, Gorys, Marcus, and the K9 would activate the autopilot of an oil tanker and make their way to the Poseidon oil rig. It is there where he learned that the dwellers of Vault 13 had also been captured by the Enclave, who had begun using them to experiment with FEV, with the Arroyo tribe being tagged for the same experiments. The Enclave used Vault 13's residents to modify the forced evolutionary virus from the Mariposa military base strain into an airborne strain that would kill off all the human mutants of the wasteland. With all the mutants gone, the Enclave would descend upon the wasteland and re-establish control of the United States. The Chosen One would not only free those held captivity by blowing up the oil rig's control computer, but also trigger a self-destruction sequence that gave them 10 minutes to escape. On their way out, a group of surviving Enclave soldiers would join the Chosen One, Marcus, and Gorys as they escaped, revealing that unless they team up to kill Frank Harrigan, none of them would get off the oil rig alive, as Frank would view the fleeing Enclave as deserters. Working together, the Chosen One's group would fight a gruesome battle against Frank Harrigan, making their escape after. The Chosen One and his group would part ways. The Chosen One would return to his village with the survivors of Vault 13 and his tribe, where they would use the GEC. With the Gieka, Arroyo would thrive and be renamed New Arroyo. The Chosen One's mother, the tribe's elder, would pass away not long after the founding of New Arroyo. The Chosen One would take her place as elder, and New Arroyo would become a powerful community. Soon after the destruction of the Enclave, the Bishop crime family of New Reno would welcome a new member into the world, the product of the romantic encounter with either Leslie Ann Bishop or Angela Bishop and the Chosen One. The Chosen One's child would ascend a leader of the Bishop crime family at the mere age of 13. Under his leadership, the Bishops would dominate New Reno, living to the ripe old age of 73, never having known his true father. K9 would be discovered by the NCR and dismantled to learn how to make more cyberdogs like him, discovering the Enclave's base at Navarro within his data, destroying the base soon after. Marcus would go on the leave Broken Hills after its mines ran dry and the population moved on to other settlements within the NCR. He would start a new community, named Jacobstown, in the Mojave, during the events of Fallout New Vegas, and would go on to recount his adventures with the Chosen One to the Courier. The NCR may have taken credit for the destruction of the Enclave with the destruction of Navarro, as the remnants of the Enclave resent the NCR for what they believe them to have done. One of the Enclave remnants in Fallout New Vegas, Judah Krieger, will tell the Courier when asked about the oil rig that internal sabotage took down the oil rig and they never did get the full story. So it appears that the wider wasteland may not be aware that it was none other than the Chosen One themselves that blew up the oil rig. This would not be the last of the Enclave, though, as during the events of Fallout 3, they are discovered to have moved west to the capital Wasteland and began to plot wasteland domination once more. 3. The Lone Wanderer. The Lone Wanderer was born on July 13, 2258, inside the ruins of the Jefferson Memorial, where James and Catherine were working on Project Purity, hoped to clean DC's waters of radiation. Unfortunately, Catherine died during childbirth, leaving James devastated. Abandoning the project, he secured entry into the still-sealed Vault 13, agreeing to the Overseer's demand that the child never learn the truth about their birth in order to preserve the Vault's isolationist experiment. Inside, James served as the Vault's doctor. What James would tell the Lone Wanderer of his mother was her favorite passage from the Bible, Revelation 21:6. And he said unto me, It is done. I am Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end. I will give unto him that is athirst of the fountain of the water of life freely. The Lone Wanderer would befriend the daughter of the Overseer, Amada, and they would spend much of their childhood together. On his 10th birthday, like every other dweller of Vault 13, the Overseer would gift them with a Pip-Boy 3000. The Lone Wanderer would live comfortably in Vault 13 until everything would suddenly change when they reached the age of 19. In 2277, James left the vault, without telling the Lone Wanderer. Chaos would erupt in the vault, as vault security would execute James's assistant Palmer and search for the lone wanderer. Amata would aid the one wanderer in their escape from the vault and arrive in a city constructed in the crater of a nuclear warhead that had not detonated upon impact with the ground, which had named itself Megaton, after the warhead still in the center of the town. There, he would meet Moira Brown, owner and proprietor of Craterside Supply in Megaton, and assist her in creating the Wasteland Survival Guide, in exchange for an armored vault suit and some supplies to aid him in his mission to find his father. The Wasteland Survival Guide would go on to be distributed all across the United States wasteland. He would also disable the town's nuclear warhead, which could have been triggered should any bad actors damage its casing. The owner of Megaton's saloon, Moriarty, would recognize the lone wanderer as James' child and tell him that his father had passed through recently on his way to Galaxy News Radio. On the way to the radio station, the lone wanderer would come across a group of Brotherhood of Steel Knights, led by Sentinel Sarah Lyons, who were fighting off a large group of super mutants that were laying siege to the radio station. At the Galaxy News radio station, they would fight against the final wave of super mutants and a massive super mutant called a behemoth, one of the largest creatures in the wasteland. Finally, the lone wanderer would meet the host of the radio station, Three Dog, who would inform him that James had just left on his way to meet a doctor named Lee in Rivet City. The lone wanderer would come across a massive dry-docked aircraft carrier, which turned out to have been repurposed into the community of Rivet City. Inside, Dr. Madison Lee revealed the truth of the lone wanderer's birth and Project Purity, with James having returned to the site of Project Purity. There, the lone wanderer would fight off a large group of super mutants and discover holotypes made by James. James would speak of a Vault 112 and a Gek that might be inside. Locating the vault's entrance hidden in an old shack, the Vault Dweller descended into Vault 112. There, the lone wanderer would find James trapped in Vault 112's Tranquility Lane simulation, controlled by the consciousness of a long-dead scientist named Stanislaus Brown, who agreed to release the Vault Dweller if they would partake in a game of theirs. Playing along and eventually bringing an end to the simulation, the lone wanderer and James would reunite and return to Project Purity. James would reveal that he did not find a Gek, but found information as to where one would be and tasked the lone wanderer with repairing the pipes that fed water to and from Project Purity. But the Enclave arrived and would take control of the site. Their leader, Colonel Autumn, would order James to assist the Enclave on continuing the project. With Autumn and James locked in the control chamber of the project, James would cause a radiation leak that would flood the chamber and kill everyone within. Colonel Autumn survived by injecting himself with Rad-X, but without James, the Enclave would not be able to start up the project. The lone wanderer fought his way out of Project Purity and to the Citadel, the ruins of the Pentagon, and enlisted the help of the Brotherhood of Steel, led by Elder Owen Lyons, Sarah's father, to locate a GECK in Vault 87. The Vault Dweller would have to don a radiation suit to get into Vault 87, where he discovered it to be the source of DC's super mutants because of the FEV vats inside. The lone wanderer would befriend a non-hostile super mutant named Fox that had been trapped by the rest of his kind because he was different, who accompanied him on his mission. Fox, who was immune to radiation due to his super mutant nature, would retrieve the GECT for the lone wanderer. Obtaining the GECA, the lone wanderer was incapacitated by Colonel Autumn and the Enclave, who ambushed him and took him back to the Enclave's stronghold of Raven Rock. There, Autumn would interrogate them for the password to activate the project, but President John Henry Eden intervened and requested an audience with the lone wanderer. Eden would allow the lone wanderer to retrieve their gear on his way to meet him. Angered by this, Autumn ordered his soldiers to attack the lone wanderer and stage a coup against President Eden. Eden assisted the lone wanderer by turning the automated defense systems of Raven Rock against Autumn's men. Meeting Eden, the lone wanderer would learn that Eden was an ZAXX AI system that gained sentience and took control of the military base. Eden would reveal that Autumn's goals it to start Project Purity and use it to draw support for the Enclave, while Eden sought to use it to disperse a canister of modified FEV, which, just in like Fallout 2, would kill off anyone and anything that had mutated DNA into the purifier that the Enclave had completed with Vault 87's Gek. Shortly after, the lone wanderer would use a code discovered on his way to Eden that would initiate a self-destruct sequence coded into Eden's AI to destroy Raven Rock. The lone wanderer returned to the Citadel and joined the Brotherhood's assault on the now Enclave stronghold of Project Purity, aided by a giant pre-war robot that tossed nukes like footballs, named Liberty Prime. The Brotherhood would fight a harsh battle against the Enclave, with the lone wanderer reaching the control chamber of Project Purity, which was still flooded with radiation. They would encounter Colonel Autumn, and who would finally meet their end at the hands of the Lone Wanderer. The Lone Wanderer would enter the code, the number of his mother's Bible verse, and activate the project. He would fall unconscious for 2 weeks and discover that Sarah Lyons ran in after them and saved their life, though she was still unconscious. For his victory, Elder Lyons promoted the Lone Wanderer to knight, told him that the Enclave War was ongoing. Liberty Prime would be destroyed by an Enclave satellite as the Brotherhood lay siege to an Enclave relay station, where the Lone Wanderer was able to download a code that would be used to locate the Enclave's new fortress at the Adams Air Force Base. The Lone Wanderer would use the presidential metro system to travel to the final Enclave base and fight their way to the satellite control system that had been used to destroy Liberty Prime. He would turn it on the Enclave and destroy the Adams Air Force Base. Sarah Lyons, who had woken up, would arrive on a vertibird to aid the Lone Wanderer in his escape. 20 years after the events of Fallout 3, Moira Brown would begin to write his tale so that all would know his sacrifice and the good he brought to the wasteland. His actions ensured that all would have clean water, protected by the Brotherhood of Steel. The Brotherhood of Steel would grow in strength and eventually make their way to the Boston Commonwealth. Though their names may be lost to time, their actions continue to affect the wasteland and influence the recovery of the post-apocalyptic world of the Fallout series. This has been what happened to every protagonist in Fallout. If you want to see 4 hours of Fallout facts to fall asleep to, click the video on the screen.